Hi everyone, welcome to Pequot Library's virtual program. My colleague Jen Pratt, give me a thumbs up when you think we are ready to proceed.
I will.
Thanks.
Just a few people filtering in. What a great group we have here tonight.
Our largest, looks like public program to date this year. Thank you all for joining us. This is amazing. Thanks for devoting your Tuesday evening to learning more about birds and bird conservation and Pequot Library's Audubon Bean Edition. We're just delighted that you all are with us. Well, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Stephanie Coakley, Director of Pequot Library, and I welcome you all to this evening's partnership program with featured speaker, Connecticut Audubon Society Director since 2017. Many of you, I'm sure, know Patrick Comins. He's worked in bird conservation for over 20 years. Patrick, thank you so very much for being with us this evening. And Mr. Comins is in conversation with Pequot Library Board President Nelson North. Nelson, thank you for your time this evening. We're really looking forward to this evening's program. And thank you to Jen, my colleague, who's working a bit behind the scenes. For those of you that would like to participate in the Q&A segment of tonight's program, we'll open that up around 6:40, 6:45. And you can do so by checking into the chat section of this webinar. Before I turn things over to Nelson and Patrick, I'd like to thank our colleagues at Fairfield University's Art Museum who organized their current exhibition, Birds of the Northeast, Gulls to Great Auks, and that's on view through May 14th. Please visit their website to learn more about that exhibition. We're honored to be a partner in that endeavor. And I invite you all, I know I have already saved and marked my calendar, saved the date for April 14th when they'll host curator and art historian Roberta Olson from the New York Historical Society, who will give a virtual public program about John James Audubon. And I also wanted to bring to your attention a recent book about Audubon that I look forward to reading by historian Gregory Nobles, titled The Nature of the American Woodsman. And of course, there are other biographies. Richard Rhodes wrote a Pulitzer Prize winning biography some years back now. And we will, Pequot Library, include these biographies and books and other related resources as part of some of our forthcoming e-newsletters. I also am looking forward to reading Suzanne Lowe's A Guide to the Birds of America. And so tonight we'll talk about, and you'll see images of our Bean edition that's part of the special collections at Pequot Library, thanks to our founder, Virginia Marquand Monroe, who assembled the prints in 10 to 12 birds at a time in the early 20th century. And it is a signature piece in our collection, and it is on display now at Pequot Library. I encourage you all to stop by during our browsing hours and take a look at it. And with that, I thank Nelson and Patrick again for joining us this evening. I'll turn it over to Patrick and Nelson. Thanks again.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. As I was saying to someone this morning, this is a rare opportunity to actually talk to the last two executive directors of Connecticut Audubon Society. Well, we're not going to be the last one, but the current executive director and the immediate predecessor. Nelson handed over the organization to me in great shape with his leadership, and I'm thrilled to be here with him this evening.
Well, Patrick, it's such a coup for us to have you here because, one, this incredible book, one of only 49 left, I think, in the world now, and then you are the Birdman. You're what it's all about. It's the life you've lived and the message that you and Connecticut Audubon Society bring to the public at large. So. It's a real pleasure, and it was great going through the book with you yesterday. I mean, it really was special. So I'm going to follow your lead. So take it away, boss.
Sure. The book that we're looking at today is the Bean edition, as you heard, of the Double Elephant Folio. And it's really a magnificent way to see Audubon's work in nearly its full glory, in the full size with very intricate chromolithograph work. The colors are spectacular. About the only thing better could have been if you're viewing the original Havel prints, which are incredibly rare. But I had the pleasure, this is the first time I've actually been able to examine a Bean edition, and I was really impressed with the quality, the colors, just the beauty of this masterpiece. You look at this, even the inside cover is a work of art.
You know, the cover is a good point too, because as you mentioned, these came in groups to the subscriber, and the subscriber then had them bound. So no two bindings, so the books were ever going to be alike. So what you're seeing here really is a custom book to hold these, what is it, 105 pages, I believe.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I did not know that. The first print that Nelson and I went over through these prints and decided, you know, what prints should we talk about? What are the historically important? What are the most beautiful? What are the most interesting prints? And of course, one of the most famous prints is the wild turkey, #1. It's a big, beautiful bird. I actually just saw a flock of wild turkeys this morning in the snow here in Stratford. I was thrilled to see them. But you know, they're absolutely a spectacular bird. Benjamin Franklin wanted wild turkey to be our national bird. He didn't like bald eagles because he thought they were bullies, which they are. But turkeys are actually misunderstood. You know, we've come to associate turkey with something stupid, but turkeys are pretty smart animals, as many birds are. And they're absolutely beautiful. We think of them as big brown birds, but when you see the iridescence on them, they're every color of the rainbow. And I was really thrilled to be examining this group of toms and seeing all the iridescence this morning because the light was just right.
Yeah. You know, the other piece, as long as we've got the turkey page up, what Audubon did is all the paintings, these are all watercolors, are all life size. So they had to be printed on this double elephant, which was, I believe, the largest print size of its time. And it measures roughly 36 by 28 inches. And he was able to get all the birds onto that size. And you'll see some interesting poses as we go forward.
And the wild turkey, one of the reasons why it's the most famous is A, it's #1, B, it's an iconic species, C, spectacular species, but D, it also has appeal for both, you know, from the public with regard to Thanksgiving. Everybody knows what a turkey is. Plus birders love turkeys, and anglers, sportsmen and women really have an appeal for turkeys. So that makes it the most famous and valuable of all the prints. Mallards. Interesting thing about mallards, they're our most common duck today. Mallards are not native to our area as a nesting species. They were originally just a passage migrant. They would, the flocks would come through in the fall, they'd winter to our south, they'd come through again in the spring, nest to our north. But mallards are also a domestic animal. And many of the mallards, there were barnyard mallards, and people would introduce them in their little farm ponds. And then the mallards were smart, and they said, wait, these mallards aren't going anywhere, why should I? So they started nesting in our area. And actually, because mallards are so closely related to our our native wild dabbling duck, the American black duck, they actually are causing a problem in terms of interbreeding with the less common American black duck and more restricted range. Mallards are found throughout the whole world. Black ducks have a much more restricted range. And this is a problem in Florida with mottled ducks. It's a problem in Hawaii with the Hawaiian duck as well. And also the Mexican mallards as well. Another one that has, multiple appeals to both, hunters as well as birders. Another species that you just can't do justice to in a photograph or a painting. It's impossible. There's no blue pigment in birds. It's all refractive. So unless you're using a prismatic paint, you're never going to capture the true blue of the Wedgwood blue of a blue jay. They're one of our smartest birds. I really like blue jays. I can remember one time there was a big flock of blue jays in my neighborhood, probably 50 birds. And I sat there listening to them for about a half hour. They were communicating over a gigantic area, almost like they were saying, well, there's hickory nuts on 5th Street. Yeah, I got butternuts over here. Oh, somebody put out the garbage over here. Oh, there's a feeder over here. You could hear them just communicating over a huge area, like a half-mile circle. And it probably was a much larger area than that, because I'm sure the birds at the edge of that circle were communicating with other ones further away. Very smart, very sociable animals, and absolutely gorgeous. They are relatives of crows. They're actually a blue crow. There's really no difference between a jay and a crow other than the fact that jays are often more colorful. This was the American crow, I believe. Mm-hmm. Yes, American crow. I think that's in a black walnut tree. That was one of the things that made Audubon a pioneer with regard to art, is that with regard to natural history art, is that he wanted to show his birds in their natural habitat. So it's not just the birds he's showing them in a tree that he may have seen crows in the past. He's not going to, obviously that's not the only tree important to crows, but he did want to show the birds in their habitat. I like this because of the iridescence on it. And crows really are iridescent. It's just very hard to see that iridescence in the field. Another very intelligent animal. The wrens. These are two of our native wrens, and I forget what he calls the lesser wren. It also used to be known as the short-billed marsh wren. That's the regular marsh wren. They nest. They've adapted well to Phragmites and are pretty common throughout wetland areas in Connecticut. This is the rare one. This is the sedge wren. Also was formerly known as the short-billed marsh wren, and I forget what Audubon called it, but that is an incredibly endangered species because it only nests in sort of wettish grasslands. It's actually adapting to a different invasive species, but a different type of grass. But in general, it needs this rare open, wet meadow type habitats. And one of the last places, if not the last place, this species nested successfully in Connecticut was at our Bafflin Preserve in Pomfret, right adjacent to one of the lakes, one of the wetlands there. And this was actually intentional management like this. I had talked to Andy Resnikevich about what sort of habitat sedge wrens liked. He had seen one here in the past, and he went and took the initiative and managed it so that it was better sedge wren habitat. And then the next year, a sedge wren showed up there. The following year, perhaps 2 pairs nested, and they successfully nested at our sanctuary. They didn't show up again the last 2 years, but they could show up again at any time. They're about our latest migrant bird. They can be as late as mid-June in their arrival. The terns, I love the poses, the Arctic tern on the left, and the gull-billed, I think it was a gull-billed tern on the right. You know, not exactly a lifelike pose for the Arctic tern. There's also some, oh no, it's a sandwich tern, sorry. There's also some maybe inaccuracies. If you look carefully on the right wing, which is on our left of the Arctic tern, here you can see it better. You see that contrasting dark in the wing, and that's actually not what Arctic terns look like. They have plain gray wings, generally speaking, and that's actually a way to tell them apart from the Comins and the roseate terns and the Forster's terns, which are all very simple. But you know, in general, it's a beautiful piece of artwork. There's a horseshoe crab in this one. That's kind of cool. Sandwich tern bird we don't get too often in our area, but they have shown up in Connecticut. Really a spectacular larger tern, almost the size of a ring-billed gull. And they are very white-winged like that, so that's an accurate depiction. The other thing about the Arctic tern is they have a very stubby, almost blood red bill, whereas that bill is kind of shaped like a common tern's bill and more orangey like a Forster's or a common tern. One thing is that bare parts of birds, many of Audubon's work were done with specimens. So bare parts of a deceased bird often fade, the bills, the legs, etc. So he may not have he probably did not see a living Arctic tern very well, and got this bird from somebody else there. You know, he probably didn't make it up there. Anyway, I'm going on too much about the terns because they're one of my favorite birds. The next one is a very interesting species, and this is the Bachman's warbler, and this is extinct. It was only found, it had very limited wintering area, mostly in Cuba, in the cane breaks there, and very limited habitat in the Carolinas for nesting. And I believe that's a Franklinia tree that it's in, which is also an extinct tree, at least extinct in the wild. It looks like a Franklinia tree. Bachman's warbler sadly is extinct. It went extinct in the 20th century, but by the time of Mabel Osgood Wright founding the Connecticut Audubon Society, and folks like Harriet Hemingway who founded Mass Audubon, and the foundation of National Audubon Society about 10 years later, this bird was already on its way out and considered one that, you know, nobody had seen. But it's sort of one of these ones that faded away. We don't know when the last one died or anything. You know, it's a little migratory warbler and flying back and forth between Cuba and the Carolinas. It's hard to know when exactly we lost the last one. The reddish egrets, beautiful birds. I don't think we've gotten the reddish egret yet in Connecticut, but if you've traveled down south, you can see there's two different forms. You can see them, and there's two different forms. There's a white form and the regular reddish form. One of the ways you can tell a reddish egret is by that really demarcated bicolored bill. And little blue herons have a little bit of a bicolored bill, but the reddish egrets have a very distinctive darker tip and lighter base that none of the other herons have, or egrets. Purple martins. I like this print because it shows them sort of in their ancestral nesting cavities, if you will. Originally, purple martins probably nested in large dead trees in small colonies, probably in association with beaver swamps quite often. The Native Americans learned that if they put up gourds, they would attract purple martins, and the purple martins would eat insects that they didn't want. So they started attracting the purple martins to their villages and to their farming operations. And then as the Europeans settled in the 17th century in this area, they learned from that and started putting up martin gourds as well, and houses. And in Connecticut, we find our martins like gourd structures better than they like the traditional houses that you may think of for a martin. We have one of the largest nesting colonies of purple martins. They're a state species of special concern. We have them at our Milford Point Coastal Center. They actually used to be in Westport at Phil Donahue's house, and he donated them as he moved back to the city with his wife. But they used to be state threatened. Now they're state species of special concern, and we have a really active colony at Milford Point. We're also trying to establish colonies at our center in Sherman, Deer Pond Farm, and also at our Roger Torrey Peterson Estuary Center, our new facility in Old Lyme, Connecticut. Oh, this one, there's the Bachman's warbler again. Oh. The martins, which are a type of swallow. They're the largest species of swallow. I think this is one of my favorite ones. Is this the carbonated warbler? This is a bird John James Audubon made up. The one on the left, no, there's a yellow warbler. That's the one on the right. But on the left in this,
there it is.
Right there. That's a bird that he made up, by all accounts. It's called the carbonated swamp warbler. There were a few warblers few birds that nobody can figure out what he was thinking of, and this is one of them. The yellow poe warbler.
There it is.
Yeah, that's the carbonated warbler, I think. Yeah, in any case, it was one. There's the blue mountain warbler, the carbonated swamp warbler, and the small-headed flycatcher are among the birds that we don't know where he got the idea for these birds, other than perhaps he made it up. Maybe he saw a unique hybrid that nobody else had ever seen. Some people think he did it on purpose in order to sell his investors in Europe by saying there are still mysteries to be uncovered in this giant continent of North America. Please give me some more money and I can track down bird and name it after you too.
There you go.
Ooh, the great white heron.
Yeah.
It's a subspecies of the great blue heron, and the reason we selected this is because there was actually a great white heron in Connecticut this year, down in Greenwich. This only the second record of a great white heron. Unfortunately, it deceased. It died, and we were actually able to recover the specimen. One of our employees, Stephen Martin, with his sharp eye, noticed it and collected it, and that's going to be very important for science to determine, A, what the cause of death was, B, was it really a white heron from Florida, or could it possibly have been an albino great blue heron? We think the former. The swallows on the left are the cliff swallows, and on the right is the barn swallow. And we chose this one just because the colors were just so beautiful, particularly in the barn swallow. Maybe a little supernatural, a little brighter than they are in reality, but still, it's a beautiful print.
There you go.
It's a bird you can attract to nesting in your garage or your house, or if you have a barn. There are special platforms you can put up. And we've actually been working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Mass Audubon on a regional aerial insectivore initiative, where we're trying to encourage landowners to put up platforms for barn swallows. And we're doing it also, we have our Pratt Preserve in Bridgewater and New Milford that is a great area for barn swallows, and we're going to try and make it better. And we actually put up or didn't tear down a silo up in Pomfret at our Bafflin Sanctuary. The barn had to be taken down, but we left the silo up and have turned it, thanks to the generous donation of a local donor, turned it into a swallow silo. Here's a bird we can't help. Unfortunately, this is another one of the extinct species, the Carolina parakeet, and a good candidate for the one species I would bring back if I could from North America. They just must have been so spectacular. I don't believe there's a Connecticut record. There are New York records, I believe, as close as Long Island. They were hunted, mainly persecuted because they were agricultural pests. But some also believe that the honeybee, the introduction of the European honeybee, ultimately led to their extinction because what was left of them that hadn't been persecuted by the farmers, European honeybees are actually a non-native species and a cavity nester, for lack of a better term, hiver, and Carolina parakeets were cavity nesters as well, and it's thought that the already declining population, really the death knell was the fact that honeybees were introduced, and then that took away a lot of the cavities that they used to nest. Spectacular birds. Probably about the same size as a monk parakeet that we still have in Connecticut. Those are an introduced species. Sorry, actually, this looks more like a carbonated swamp warbler on the left than the one I was talking about. I don't know what he meant with the yellow pole warbler. Yeah, that is a carbonated swamp warbler. You know, maybe it's a hybrid between a magnolia and something, but nothing looks even remotely like that. I think on this same page are the yellow palm warblers. That's what those are. Yeah, the carbonated swamp warbler, the blue mountain warbler, the small-headed flycatcher, and maybe a couple others were thought to be made up. But yeah, I mean, I really can't think of a bird that looks anything remotely like a carbonated swamp warbler. I can't think of even a hybrid combination that would look like that. Maybe Blackpoll X magnolia. The American flamingo, one of the most beautiful prints there. And Nelson was talking about all the contortions that Audubon had to use to fit some of these larger birds on the page. And this is the classic example. I actually have, I think they're greater flamingos is the official name now. It's listed as American flamingo, but I have them on my North America list thanks to Eco Travel on a trip down to the Everglades about 20 years ago. We saw them flying by, a flock of them. Quite a thrill. Just a spectacular bird. I was watching a documentary about some African flamingos the other day, and just how they can eke out an existence at the edge of these alkali lakes that if you were to stick your hand in, it would come up with no skin left on it. But there's these little midges that can support these huge African flamingo colonies that live at the edges, brine shrimp and midges, and you know, life will find a way. Another sadly extinct species, and the first of our region species, well, maybe Labrador duck was about the same time. But no, actually, I think the great auk went extinct before the Labrador duck. We're pretty sure we know the last one. It was actually clubbed in Iceland and is now in the skeleton is in a museum in Reykjavik, Iceland. I've actually seen that skeleton of the last auk. They were a big bird. They were a flightless bird. They may look like penguins, but they're more closely related to puffins and razorbills and dovekies and the like. They were probably about waist high, you know, flightless, really a magnificent bird. One I really wish I could see. Flightless bird, not a good combination with 19th century hungry whalers, and they needed their protein, and this was an easy way. And they probably got tired of seafood and whale meat and didn't know any better. The red tails fighting over a rabbit. It will be the female on the bottom, most likely. Notice it's much larger, and then the male on the top is in most raptors and owls, which aren't particularly closely related. And falcons also, which are not closely related to either. The females are larger than the males. There's two advantages to that. One, the female can have more fat reserves and therefore can sit on the nest longer. B, she's a better defender of the nest because of her size, whereas the male is more agile and can also, come in and have backup for them. And it also maybe stratifies the prey that they can take. The males can take smaller, more agile prey, and the females can go after larger prey. So in a sense, it gives them a broader range of prey to feed their young. Barn owls. Endangered species in Connecticut. We do have Millie, the barn owl at our Fairfield Nature Center, which is a captive raised barn owl and an education ambassador bird. This is one of the most widespread birds in the world. They're found, I believe, in every continent except for Antarctica. There are a couple of close relatives to them in Asia and Australia, the bay owl being one of them. But around here, they're fairly unique. They're in their own family, somewhat closely related to the other owls. Connecticut, they are practically extinct. They're one of the most endangered species in Connecticut. They still hang on in a few areas, often industrial areas where there's abandoned buildings. For a while, they were in Bridgeport. I don't think they're in Bridgeport anymore. I had the good fortune of having the heck scared out of me by a barn owl one time when I was at Stratford Point at my office there. I was working late. It was about 10 o'clock at night on a May evening. I walked out on the porch to watch the moon rise, and there was a barn owl sitting on the couch out there, and it screamed. And if you've ever heard a barn owl scream, it is just ear-piercing and terrifying. And I figured out what it was within a matter of fraction of a second, but it scared the heck out of me until I realized what it was. And I think a lot of the ghost stories in New England are caused by barn owls, because this white figure that flies out and screams like bloody murder. Brown pelican. We specifically chose this one because there was a story recently of a rescue from brown pelican that I and Connecticut Audubon Society played a big role in. What happened was someone found a pelican in Old Saybrook at Saybrook Point, and they took a photo of it. They posted it to our Facebook page. Andy Griswold, who some of you may know, he's the head of our eco travel program. He said, this isn't the best thing for a brown pelican to be up here. He spent the rest of the day looking for it. After work, he couldn't find it. He got up at first light the next morning, searching all the spots. After a few hours, he found the pelican at a yacht club in Essex. He called me. I was able to coordinate with rehabbers, local rehabbers, and rehabbers down south with experience in rehabilitating brown pelicans, and the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection helped us rescue the bird. They're a fairly big bird, maybe around 7-foot wingspan. Surprisingly, they only weigh 3 to 5 pounds. I was shocked as to how little they weigh. But notice that nail on the end of the bill. When you're thinking of birds, you've got to think of they're a lot more powerful than their weight suggests. and think of a 3 to 5 pound angry dinosaur without teeth, but with a nail on the end of its bill. And that's what you're dealing with if you're trying to capture a healthy brown pelican. The pelican was on death's door. It didn't resist at all. Everybody was safe in the capture. We brought it down to a place called Hope. They got fluids in it, kept it in a warm place, played sounds of the surf. I coordinated back and forth between them and rehabbers down south. We found pilots to bring it down to Florida, and now it's in Florida and recovering wonderfully, and also going to be released likely. We actually had CAS members out there with their minnow traps on the coldest days of the year, catching minnows to feed this bird live fresh fish while it was being rehabbed at a place called Hope. So it was a real team effort with many organizations and people playing a key role. Black vulture used to be a very rare bird in Connecticut. Some days you can find more black vultures in the wintertime than you can find turkey vultures here in Connecticut. They're less migratory than the turkey vultures. They've moved up from the south, perhaps because of increased deer populations, perhaps because of climate change, perhaps because of adaptation to landfills and the like. Who knows? But they used to be incredibly rare in Connecticut, and now they are, you can see one anywhere in the state. In the field, the way you can pick them out is they have a very unique flap. That they flap from the wrist very quickly. They'll glide, they have short wings, they'll glide, and then they'll do this very strange flap like that, very deep wing beats, and they have white wing patches in their primaries as opposed to the entire trailing edge of silver in a turkey vulture. The color of the heads isn't going to help you much in the field in most cases. One of my favorite prints right here, the white gyrfalcon. I've never seen a white gyrfalcon. I've seen a gray phase in Iceland, of course, on an eco-travel trip as well. Great destinations that Indy takes folks to. But, oh man, I would love to see this bird. There was one in New York State about 3 or 4 years ago, a white one. It was an immature. It wasn't fully white like this, but man, that's a holy grail bird right there. They're a little bigger than a peregrine falcon, often more likely to take their prey on a horizontal pursuit. They'll chase it down, whereas peregrines rely on a stoop where they go up high and then dive down at 200 plus miles an hour and just surprise the bird. And peregrines will take prey up to the size of a mallard, which is a larger, heavier bird than peregrine, and that's because they have that element of surprise. The gyrfalcon just does it through sheer aerobatics and speed, and just, everybody grew up thinking that falcons were sort of similar to hawks. The latest DNA showed that they're actually more closely related to parrots, much more closely related to parrots, and more closely related to songbirds than they are to hawks. So, a gyrfalcon might say, "Polly, want a shorebird?" Yeah, that's a bad joke.
Sure.
Ah, yes, the sharp-tailed finch in here. This is the sharp-tailed sparrow. It looks like a salt marsh sparrow that he chose just from the amount of streaking on it, the coloring on it. This species was split into 2 different species: the salt marsh sparrow and the Nelson sparrow. Nelson. Maybe it was named after you. It was a recent split. So the salt marsh sparrow is the one that nests in our area and is highly endangered. It's one of the most endangered birds in the world, globally endangered, not just at risk of local extirpation like the barn owl is. That bird is probably going to go extinct within the next 50 years. And the reason is it lays its eggs only in one particular specialized habitat, and that is the high marsh, the salt meadow, the cordgrass, salt meadow cordgrass, the areas of the marsh that only flood twice a month. They come back in the spring, they nest, and invariably their nests are washed out, then every bird in their colony, it's a loose colony, they don't form pairs, nests synchronously at the same time, and they race between that last spring tide and the next spring tide. And if they're lucky, their young are just strong enough to clamber up in some reeds to get out of the way of the incoming flood tide. And because of that, that interval, even a few millimeters of sea level rise, shortens that interval between those two spring tide events and reduces their productivity. Other species like seaside sparrow have a chance because they can put their nest up in reeds up off the ground. But the salt marsh sparrow, because of its very limited range, very limited habitat, and its nesting on the ground in tidal marshes, is about the most endangered species when it comes to climate change and rising sea levels in the world. And Connecticut is a very important place for salt marsh sparrows. Conservation isn't just something you think of on the Great Barrier Reef or the Amazon rainforest or the highlands of cloud forests of Africa. It's in our own backyard. We have many species of global conservation concern, including salt marsh sparrows, semi-pollinated sandpipers, wood thrushes, cerulean warblers, and others, and even common grackles now. They're on the global list. This may have been the last one. No, ruffed grouse. This is one of Nelson's favorite birds. I do know that. An absolute beautiful bird. They have declined quite a bit in the Northeast. They are a hunted species. They're a game species. But it's not hunting that's done them in. It's likely ground predators like coyotes and bobcats, which have returned, and fishers that have returned to the state, and loss of early successional habitat because our forests have grown back up. Think about it, in 1938, almost all of our forests were leveled. So between 1938 and the 80s, we had 0 to 50-year-old forests. Now those are getting into be 80-plus-year-old forests. Without management to create this scrub habitat that the ruffed grouse needs, they can't reproduce. And ruffed grouse normally have a very short life, but produce a lot of young. That is 20 pullets in a brood that they can have. So they're reproductive limited species. So actually the fact that they're a hunted species is to their benefit, because sportsmen and women are creating habitat for them all over the state, trying to conserve them. That's actually creating more habitat and more grouse than the hunters are actually taking out. And most hunters aren't hunting grouse anymore. Very few are hunting grouse, and almost none in Connecticut. So I think that was perfect timing, because they said to go to 6:45.
Yep, we did it. You did it. Well done, Patrick. That was fabulous. Jen, do you have some comments?
Oh, Patrick, thank you, first of all, so much. That was amazing. You must be parched. You were talking like a speed demon, but I learned so much.
I just want to weigh in too and add that I don't think we can think of anyone who has more of an extensive knowledge of birds and bird conservation. We can't thank you enough for being with us tonight. We learned so very much, and I just want to point people in the direction of ConnecticutAudubon.org. Check out their website to learn more about the important, great work you're doing. And thanks too for recounting the story about the pelican in Old Saybrook. Really, really amazing.
Yeah.
Great.
Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
I've left the Connecticut Audubon Society's webpage in the chat, so if anybody wants to visit that, they can.
Good.
Also,
Good.
I see some questions in the chat, so we'll get to those. I just want to quickly, before we move on, encourage anybody who has any questions to put them in the chat or the Q&A module. Let them know that the exhibition will be on view until May 2nd, and we'll be doing weekly page turnings. So right now we have a wild turkey, our first image, open in the display case, and it'll be changing every week. So stop by many times to visit. And Patrick, your first question is, The Southport bald eagles, are they likely to stay here or do they migrate?
They're probably year-round residents. Most of our eagles are year-round residents. Eagles are highly migratory. The further north they nest, the further south they go. And we're sort of in that area where they stay put a little bit. You know, maybe in the harsh winter when there's no open water, they might go to New Jersey or something like that. But we think most of our eagles are hanging out in our area year-round in their territories. Eagles have really been one of the great success stories of conservation. In my memory, I can remember when there was only one nesting pair of bald eagles in the state. That was up in Barkhamsted. And seeing an eagle was something you had to do to go to the Connecticut River in the coldest weeks.
That's right.
Freeze your hands off, and maybe you'd see an eagle across the river if you were lucky. These days, you can find an eagle anywhere, any place in Connecticut. They nest in Bridgeport, they nest in Southport, they nest in Hartford, 2 pairs in Hartford, you know, anywhere, anytime in Connecticut.
Great. And our next question is about herons. The larger herons that we see around here, are they great blue herons, the bluish colored ones?
Yeah, particularly in the wintertime and you know, spring and fall. Most of the nesting great blue herons are inland Connecticut, although we get a few stragglers on the coast. But they're about the only blue or dark heron you're going to find here in the wintertime. More numbers of their short distance migrants, again, more numbers of the great blue herons come down to the coast in migration and stay for the winter, and then they go back inland. And they're a really early nester, and they're probably already starting to return to their nesting colonies right now as we speak. But yes, they're the larger ones. We also have great egrets, which are the big white ones, and we have little blue herons, which are quite a bit smaller, and you wouldn't easily confuse them with a great blue heron. They look more purple than a great blue heron, which looks gray. The one bird you could confuse with a great blue heron is a gray heron, but we don't get them around here too often.
How often are migratory birds that don't usually land in Connecticut finding their way up here, similar to our friend the brown pelican?
It happens all the time. I mean, I can remember it was not all that long ago, we had something like 415 species on the Connecticut list. And right now we're in the 450s, I believe. We're always getting new ones. This year I can think, well, you know, in recent years, we've had the roseate spoonbill that showed up in Milford and Stratford. That was a new species for our list that a lot of people got to see. This year, there was a Pacific golden plover that showed up at the Sikorsky Memorial Airport in Stratford. That was the first ever record of a Pacific golden plover. There was a Townsend's warbler seen up in a cemetery in Hartford, Evergreen Cemetery, or Cedar Hill Cemetery. So I think that's Cedar Hill. But that was found by Paul Desjardins. And was a great new addition to the Connecticut list. We had, well, it wasn't a new addition to the list, but yellow rail one showed up at our coastal center this year. Someone brought it to us in a box, and that was a life bird for so many people who got to see it because they're just so rare in Connecticut. And that was an incredibly rare bird. There was a dovekey that got, actually a place called Hope was involved in that too. Christine texted me and she said, where should I release a dovekey? And I determined, I said, well, I'll meet you at Meg's Point at Hammonasset, and that's where we released it. And you know, a group of about 100 birders got to see this dovekey, which is a type of alcid like the great auk, except a really tiny one, about the size of a robin, or actually even smaller, more like the size of a starling. So a lot of people got to see that bird for the first time. Climate change, you know, some birds are moving their ranges northward, whether it's related to climate change or not. It's sort of like saying any given storm is related to climate change. You can't say Hurricane Sandy was a result of climate change. What you can say is that storms like Hurricane Sandy might be more common and more intense because climate is a law of averages. Likewise, with bird ranges, many birds are moving their nesting ranges and wintering ranges northwards. We've seen it northern mockingbirds, northern cardinals, tufted titmouse, red-bellied woodpeckers. Very few birds are moving southwards. The only ones I can think of are common raven and yellow-bellied sapsucker. And those are for different reasons other than temperature. So yeah, you know, as climate changes, we're going to get more storms, stronger storms more often, and probably it's going to be causing more birds to get blown off course. But we also may be having birds moving out of our area as nesters, like the veery and the black-capped chickadee, and into our area as nesters, like the blue grosbeak and Carolina chickadee, maybe eventually.
Another question, somebody is hoping that you can let us know about the hummingbird species that we can see here in Connecticut.
Yeah, almost 999 out of well, probably even more than that. 999,999 out of a million hummingbirds here are going to be ruby-throated hummingbirds. The exception is if you get a hummingbird late, you know, after mid-October at your feeders. And please do keep your hummingbird feeders up late, because these birds show up here. They're Western, they're rare species. They show up here regardless. It's not that keeping your hummingbird feeder up is actually causing them not to migrate. And in fact, your hummingbird feeder being up could be a lifeline for one of these rare hummingbirds from the West that has shown here. The one hummingbird that we get is the ruby-throated hummingbird. That's the one that nests in our area. But occasionally in the fall, we've had rufous hummingbirds, we've had calliope hummingbirds, we've had black-chinned hummingbirds. I believe we've had a mango at one point. No, sorry, it was a Mexican violet ear. That was a really weird sighting, but it was photographed. And we have broad-billed hummingbird also on our list. There are a couple other ones that have shown up on neighboring states that we don't yet have. Green violet ear being one of them, and Allen's and Anna's hummingbirds as well.
This is a selfish question. How are the snowy owl sightings going this winter? Are we having another big, you know, what is the word? You had a
eruption.
Eruption, thank you.
Yes, not a huge eruption of snowy owls in this area, more in the Midwest. I've seen probably 3 individual different snowy owls in Connecticut this winter. About 2 or 3 years ago, we had like 15 or 20 of them. You know, there are a few of them around. There's one in Central Park, or at least there's been one in Central Park. We also didn't get the eruption of barn owls that we did two years ago as well. That was very interesting. And, you know, it's kind of a slow winter for owls. There's a couple of short-eared owls around. There aren't many long-eared owls. There aren't many saw-whets, and just a handful of snowies.
And someone is wondering if you are still selling your Audubon prints in the gift shop at CAS.
Yes, we are.
Excellent.
And you can call Jane there, 203-869-5272. I'm not sure her extension, but Jane Gunther is the one that you want to talk to. And also check out our website that has information on our Fairfield Center. You know, in this area, we have several sanctuaries. We have our Birdcraft sanctuary, which has a center there. The museum is not really a museum at this time. We hope to renovate that and turn it back into a museum at some point. We have our Fairfield Nature Center. We also have our Larson Sanctuary. We have our Smith-Richardson Sanctuary in Westport, which has been really transformed over the past 3 years. If you haven't been to Smith-Richardson lately, it used to be the haunted forest from Wizard of Oz, and now it's just this first-class rest stop on the avian superhighway of the Atlantic Flyway.
Yeah, thanks to a lot of volunteer work, I understand.
Yes, absolutely. Charlie Stebbins, Jared O'Connell, many of the neighbors, the Slobs, from Staples High School, many, you know, the Westport Charity League, all sorts of volunteers have really helped, but Charlie and Jared especially, they've just been a driving force behind this. We've got some funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, but if it wasn't for all the volunteer work and the money that they've raised there, we would never have been able to get the match required. We still do need to maintain Smith Richardson, so we're trying to do a campaign to get more money to make sure that we maintain the habitats. We don't want it sliding back to what it used to be. We want to keep it, you know, a prime, beautiful area to visit and an amazing area for birds. And in fall migration, oh man, that place is amazing. We call it Sparrowdice because we actually plant special crops to attract sparrows, the migrating native sparrows. You get bobolinks. We've had rare ones show up there, like lark sparrows and Nelson sparrows and all sorts of cool stuff.
I'm loving all the bird jokes, by the way. I'm a fan. So I don't know if any of our panelists know the answer to this question, and if nobody does, we can definitely find out because Beth Bowden, our special collections librarian, will definitely know. And that is what the subscription cost in the early 1900s when people were buying these prints and then binding them.
No, I don't know. I don't know.
So Jen, it was a most expensive endeavor. And the Havel edition before the Bean, I think I recently read that in today's dollars, multi-million-dollar project, right? So then somewhere in the realm of 25 to 30,000, I think I've read. And so certainly subscriptions were a pricey collector's habit for sure.
Yeah, I think you're ringing a bell in my head that I think Beth was telling me that just one of the sets was like $9,000, which was something like,
Okay.
I can't do that conversion, but significant.
And
well, when you think about it, there was, you know, my sister has, her lucky year was 1908 because of when our grand uncle was born. So I ended up, I owed her a favor and I bought her a coin that she wanted from 1908. And it was a $10 gold coin. And, you know, when you think about it, it's about the size of a quarter. When you think about it, you know, a chunk of gold like that, that was a week's pay in 1908 for somebody. Just like today, the gold value of that is probably equal to your average weekly pay today. The value of the gold in that coin today, but you know, in the early 19th century, a silver dollar would be something people would counterfeit because that's more than a week's pay. Like a $50 would have been your week's pay in say 1812. Yeah. So money really, I actually carry around a 1/2 cent in my wallet as a lucky coin. And also just as a reminder that money changes. You know, it used to be, and it's a big hunk of copper about the size of a nickel maybe. And you know, people, money used to be so valuable you needed a 1/2 cent in order to do commerce. So things have changed.
Yeah, they sure have. I think we can do one. I have one last question here, and it's a great question. So, and Stephanie, I think you know the answer to this, and that is, where are the rest of the Bien edition folios? And it's kind of like a mixed bag, isn't it?
I think so for sure, and we're awfully grateful to be able to put ours on display. It's again on view at Pequot Library in a case that was custom designed for its large size, and do come by and see it. There's certainly few around, and it's a rare treasure.
Yeah, for sure.
And so Jen, I should recognize you also as a former Connecticut Audubon Society representative, and a shout out to the amazing team over there, Patrick. Do sign up for the Connecticut Audubon Society's e-newsletters. They're extremely informative. And Nelson, as the organization's past director, we're honored to have you all here representing our friends over at the Connecticut Audubon Society. Patrick, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick.
This evening.
You're welcome. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, Nelson.
Your enthusiasm is contagious.
It sure is, Patrick. You're the best. Thank you.
Birds. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Stephanie. Thank you,
for
Jennifer,
coming.
for all the
Good
work
night, all.
setting this up.
Of course, my
And
pleasure.
thank you, everybody who are library members out there. Thank you, everybody who's library supporters, and thank you to everybody who's Connecticut Audubon Society members and volunteers. And we probably have some board members on, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate. You are the Connecticut Audubon Society. Thank you so much.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Good night. Be well.
All right.